Hello, all the crazy people out there. My name is Michael. I like wizards and dragons and making games, and welcome back to Screen Space Ambient Occlusion in GameMaker, or SSAO for short, because sometimes words in computer graphics really do just have names that are too long. Anyway, so this is going to be the third in what is hopefully going to be a three-part series in implementing Screen Space Ambient Occlusion in GameMaker. In the first two videos, we actually implemented the effect itself, and today we're just going to play around with the effect, and we're going to fine-tune it in various ways to maybe improve it. Improve how it looks, and also maybe improve performance. So, the first thing I'm going to do is going to be to actually close out of this, go into the step event of OBJ camera here, and I'm just going to decrease the movement speed because I'm getting a little bit tired of trying to fly around and zoom in properly on, like, close corners and stuff so that I can really look at the effect up close. Anyway, so what we're going to start with after we decrease the camera movement speed is going to be to look at this screen space ambient occlusion effect in a corner like this one. And we're going to notice that it looks a little bit grainy. And that is because when we're doing our SSAO effect, we are taking a finite number of samples. We're sampling a random number of points around each fragment, and we're checking to see if it's behind a wall or not. So because we are taking a finite number of samples, we're not going to like perfectly be able to figure out exactly how much ambient occlusion there should be on each fragment. So what we can do instead, we can increase the sample count and we can get a more accurate answer, but that's going to require us to take a lot of samples, which isn't really maybe ideal. Or what we can do is we can apply a slight blur effect to the output of the SSAO shader, and we can just use that instead. And that's the solution that I'm going to go with. So I don't have a blur shader in this project yet. If you have a favorite blur shader, you can go ahead and do that. A two-pass box blur, a Gaussian blur. I'm just going to go and grab a radial blur or disk blur from SHD_blur from an old project, because I like the fact that this will allow us to only have to do like one pass of the blur. We're not going to have to do it in two passes. But if you have a type of blur that you prefer to use with this, feel free to use it. Let me see. I already have a SSAO surf_blur, which isn't currently being used, but I will go and, instead of drawing the SSAO surface directly with the multiplicative blending onto the final scene, I'm going to take an intermediate step. I'm going to say surface set target, SSAO surf blur. At some point when we're done, surface reset target, shader set SHD blur. At some point when we're done, shader reset. And in between here, we can draw surface, the SSAO surface at coordinate 0, 0. And when we draw the final image, instead of drawing the original SSAO surface, we can just draw the blurred one. I will need to go and apply some uniforms, so let's go. I'm just going to copy these from up above, and we can fill in the values. First, we want the texture size, and this is going to be surface get width, that, and surface get height, that. We also might want the blur radius, and that is going to be this value that we defined in the create event earlier. And lastly, we might want the sample count, and this is going to be a different value than the SSAO surface sample count. This is going to be the blur shader sample count, which is used for a similar purpose, but it's going to be a different number. And, of course, we want a shader get uniform SHD blur. Let's see. Everything else should be fine, I think. We've just gone and inserted a step of blur in between the actual effect and the final image. And now, you can see up at the top immediately, you can see a bit of a difference. So the fact that the original surface is being downsampled as heavily as it is also making it a little bit grainier than it ordinarily would be. But you can definitely see the difference between that and the blurred version, which definitely looks smoother right off the bat. And if I were to go and zoom into a corner, we can see that the ambient occlusion effect has been smoothed out considerably. compared to what it was earlier. So this doesn't quite come for free. You might notice a few weird lingering issues if you do this, for example, around overhangs. Because this is a screen space effect, and because the shader doesn't actually have any knowledge of like what objects are in your scene, much less the blur shader. Because pixels are being averaged together with their neighbors, any hard line of contrast in the SSAO effect is going to be smeared out a little bit like this, for example, around this overhang. And we do now have like a single line or maybe a 2 pixel wide line over here. And that's maybe not something that you really want. Probably the easiest way to get rid of that is to shrink the blur radius by some amount. All of these values here that we've set up are intended to be configurable, right? So if you want to mess with the sample count to see how that affects the final image, if you want to mess with the SSAO radius to see how that affects the final image, I'm going to go and create myself a lovely dbg_view like this, and we're just going to go and dbg slider. We're going to create a couple different bits of UI, debug UI, that are going to allow us to change these values. I think I will set the maximum sample count to just the size of that random samples array. We can also mess with the radius. We can go from like 0 to, I don't know, 10 or something. We can mess with the bias, and honestly, messing with the bias probably isn't really going to be very useful. I have yet to really find a bias value that is better in pretty much any situation that's better than what I've set it to here. We can also set the blur size, the blur radius, and I'm going to set that to maybe a range of 0 to 10, and the blur sample count. And this can be a number between, let's say, 1 and 100. There's not really a point in making this number too high, because you will definitely see diminishing returns after a point. But now when I run the game, if I were to go and zoom in, and I won't get the, I won't only look at the corner here because I do want to see this overhang, but we can increase or decrease the sample count, and you can see when I set the sample count very low, it's definitely going to be very noisy. And when I set it to very high, we're really seeing diminishing returns after maybe like 30 or 40 or so. Because of the blur effect. I'll go with, let's go with 30. The radius, we can make the halo wider, and that definitely looks pretty, like, disproportionately insane. It also starts to definitely break around edges at a very high radius. This is, like, the most PS3 generation looking thing that's ever appeared on my screen in one of these videos. Yeah, let's go and reduce the radius a little bit. What did I have it to? 1? I think that's fine. The bias, again, we can change the bias to change how aggressively areas are shadowed. But I think really isn't that much of a point in making it too heavy. And the blur size. So I think, what did we say? 4 was definitely too much. What if I go to like 2? So setting the blur radius to 2 definitely decreased the like the overhang halo that we were seeing earlier. And we can also increase or decrease the blur sample count. It really doesn't seem to make that much of a difference after like 10 or 20 or so. The image that we're blurring here isn't like that interesting, but those are some of the modifiable parameters that we can play with. I also said I would talk about performance. And a lot of this is tied into performance because things like the sample count, if you take more samples, it's going to take longer. Let's see. Should I just, like, draw text? Like that on the screen so that we can see a performance readout. This is a screen space effect, so it doesn't really matter what I look at, but if I increase the sample count... Oh, I should uncap the frame rate. Let me go and do that. Does GameMaker still let me uncap frame rates by setting the like game speed to some monstrously high value? They changed how that works recently, and I find it vaguely annoying. Alright, so we're getting about 900 FPS here, 1000 FPS or so. If I increase the sample count, that's going to go down dramatically so, although not as much as I thought it was going to, I have to say. If I decrease the sample count, it'll go down. If I increase the sample count of the blur effect, that'll also have an impact. But what did we decide on earlier? Like a sample count of like 30 and a blur sample count of maybe like 10 or so. And a blur radius of 2. So that, when you tune the, and now everything's moving too fast. When you tune the parameters of the SSAO effect, it's definitely not as heavy as it can be. Definitely not as heavy as it would be if I really dialed up all the settings as high as they'll go. Increasing the radii will have a small impact on performance because of like texture cache locality and that sort of thing, but the other knobs are probably going to have a bigger impact. All right, I'm going to go, and I'm surprised I forgot to include this in the uniforms originally when I did it, because I usually do like this as an optimization in post-processing effects. But let's say SSAO scale, and we can define this as a number between 0 and 1. We can compute the post-processing effects at a lower resolution, and they should mostly look okay, but computing an effect at lower resolution will also have a performance improvement, so we might as well just try that out. Let's create another slider for SSAO scale. We can set it to a range of 0 to 1 because there's no point going higher than 1 because people who are into super sampling are weirdos. Let's see, where am I going and like initializing these? Is it in the draw event? Alright, so SSAO Surf Main and SSAO Surf Normal, these are the original render targets, so I want to leave those to be the same size, but the SSAO surface, which is going to be what we draw the effect onto, and the blur surface, those I want to be scaled down. So I'm going to multiply both the width and the height of these two surfaces by this number. I'm also going to say if not surface exists, or surface get width is not equal to W times that, or surface get height is not equal to H times that. So we're going to validate that the surfaces both exist and are the correct size. Handy utility function if you want to put this in a function call instead of writing them out the long way.
Hey.
So just doing this, if I shrink the SSAO surface size, it's going to look a little bit weird because, well, the effect is only going to like cover part of the screen and it's just going to like disappear here. A little bit weird. So what we're going to want to do now is we're going to want to draw the surfaces scaled or stretched, as the GameMaker function is. And we're going to draw the main surface. So this is the original render targets, the original geometry buffer. We're going to draw that stretched to be the size of surface get width, the SSAO surface get height, like that. The blur surface should be the same size, so we don't have to really go out of our way to draw that stretched, although you can if you want to. And then when we are drawing the SSAO surface, this is going to be like half size or a quarter size or whatever. And we can draw surface stretched to be the original size surface. You can either say surface get width of the main surface, or because it's going to be the width and the height macros, we can just do that, save ourselves some trouble. So now, even when I've slowed down the camera speed now, we're like going really fast because the frame rate is really high. So now, if I decrease the scale of the surface, probably down to like half or so, you don't see that much of an impact. Maybe 70%, 80% or so. Why? Oh, you know what? Why the game is lagging is because so surface size is an integer, but this value is like a floating point number, so it's recreating and destroying the surfaces every step. Let's say the scaled width is going to be width times SSAO scale. Scaled height is going to be height times SSAO scale. And we can floor both of these like that. And we can use these values. That doesn't look right. What did I do? I meant to... There we go. It's nice that GameMaker generally will accept any old number, even if it's a floating point number, for things like the width and the height of surfaces and whatnot, but you can get yourself in trouble if you are comparing the size of a surface to a number with a fractional part.
Hey.
Alright, so let's try this again. And now let's stand here looking at the stairs, which is my favorite test area here, and we can drop the SSAO scale to, what did I say, 75% or so. Drop the sample count to 30 or so. Blur size, blur sample count a little bit. And it's a little bit noisier than it was earlier, but I think it's definitely better. And we did get back a little bit of performance there. This is the sort of quality setting that you can expect to make heavy use of in games. Things like this. Meh. Alright, we're really going too fast here. I should cap the frame rate again, because this is... Now that I've made my point, this is a little bit silly. Anyway, if you're using this in a game, feel free to go ahead and make this like a quality setting in your game's menu, even if it's just like SSAO off, high, low, without letting the users get their hands dirty with every single one of these settings, because it can make a big difference in how the game performs at a fairly minor cost to how it looks. Just something to keep in mind. Something else you might want to do, and this is going to be wholly unrelated to performance, is a SSAO strength value. So if I add another setting, and this can be a number between 0 and 1 that will like transition the effect on or off. And this probably might be useful if you just think the effect is too much. You could just fade the effect out. This is another one that I should have probably set up and acknowledged back at the beginning, but I forgot, so we're doing it now. Let's see, there's a couple of different places you can plug this number into any of the various shaders here, but I think the one that I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the main SSAO shader. I'm going to say uniform float u SSAO strength, and we can just at the end we're going to have this occlusion total final number, and it's going to be a value of 0 is going to be heavy occlusion, a value of 1 is going to be no occlusion. We can say occlusion total is going to be, we can lerp this from the value that you computed here. Actually, no, I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to lerp from 1.0 to the occlusion total value, and the factor that we're going to use, the lerp factor, is going to be that uniform. That way, if SSAO strength is 1, if you lerp from 1 to a number, the result is going to be that number. If SSAO strength is like 0, if you lerp from 1 to a number, the result is going to be 1. If the value is 1/2, it's going to be halfway in between. The lerp function in GLSL is called mix, and as far as I'm concerned, it's a devastating tragedy. Why would you not name a function lerp when you have the option to name a function lerp? The Cronus group people hate fun. And I'm going to need to go and actually set this uniform somewhere. So let's just go and grab one of these uniforms. We can take that SSAO strength value. We can place it in there. We can take the uniform name. We can place it in here. And now I have another slider which is going to fade out the effect just globally. I can turn the slider down. I can turn the effect off if I think it's too overbearing and I just want a very, very mild effect like this. This does not have an effect on performance. We are simply transitioning from, like, a number from 0 to 1. we're not doing less work or improving cache locality or anything like that by doing this. But that is something that might be nice to have. Again, if you think it is an effect that is just a little bit too much. I have not been committing these changes. I probably should have been doing that as I go. Anyway, one more change. So, let's say that you want the effect to fade out at a distance, and you can see... It's probably easier to see in the, like, preview up here than it is to see in the actual game screen. But for distant objects, the effect is still being computed in screen space with, like, line thicknesses as the same as they would be if a object was up close. And that can result in, like, slightly heavier than expected outlines on distant objects, and that might be something that you don't want. So it is also entirely possible and possibly reasonable to fade this effect out based on distance as well. So we have, where is get vs position from source? We can get, like, our linear depth like this. And I'm just going to go and copy and paste this here. We are kind of computing it twice. We can get our linear depth like this. This is going to be a value between 0 and 1 for the depth of every fragment, but it's not going to be scaled, giving fragments that are closer to the camera more weight than fragments that are far from the camera. And you can also use this to fade out the SSAO effect on fragments that are farther away from you. And we can do the same thing. We can lerp from 1 to our occlusion value, or in this case, I think we might want to go the other way, because a value of 0 is going to be close, we want full occlusion. A value of 1 is going to be far, we want no occlusion. It's going to be the opposite of the SSAO strength value. So you can do 1.0 minus this, or you can simply flip the operands around here, so we can lerp in the other direction. Why don't you like this? Is it because the UVs... Alright, yeah. That's a variable name which doesn't exist in the scope that this code is running in. Alright. Let's try this now, and we can see in the preview that the effect is going to be fading out at a distance, and it's going to be fading in when we get close. So when we're standing right in front of something, the effect is still going to be there, but when we look at a distant object, it's not going to have the effect on it. So those rocks that are farther away, the effect is going to be faded out a little bit. If I were to back up even more, the effect would be faded out still more. You could use different, basically, easing functions on this to fade the effect out at different rates at different intervals. It's one of those things that's a lot like GPU pixel fog, which you have probably written a shader for, because that's probably one of the easier 3D shaders to write if you're just writing a shader for the first time. You could use linear interpolation to fade the SSAO effect out. You could use, like, smooth step or something to fade the effect out. You could use some other easing function. It doesn't matter. And I think I'm going to end this off here. So, this is... that was a lot of fun. I had fun doing this. By the way, I don't actually remember. Is GPU set text filter? Alright, so do I have texture filtering on? Is it on by default? It is on by default because GameMaker. Still don't really agree with that choice, but in this case it works out. When you do go and blur the, when you go and apply the blur effect, you probably want to make sure that texture filtering is on. And maybe you want to turn it off when you're done. Like that. Blur effects with texture filtering off tend to look a little bit, like, artifacty. But here it didn't really matter because I think it was already on. Anyway, yeah, that's probably it for screen space ambient occlusion. I don't think there's really anything else that I want to do here. Anyway, yeah, my name is Michael. I like wizards and dragons and making games. If you want the code for this, as usual, link to the GitHub repository can be found down in the description of this video. I do like to post videos on all kinds of weird stuff that you can do in GameMaker, both 3D stuff like this, and also I've been doing more beginner videos lately, so if you're interested in any of that, feel free to subscribe. I have a Patreon, so if you wanted to contribute to the channel, links to that can be found in all the usual places. You should all go check out Wizard Ducks and the Lost Hat, which is one of the games that I like to work on when I'm not doing YouTube stuff. Link to the Steam page can be found down below. I hope you all enjoyed that, and I will see you all later. Special thanks to Zenjamin, Zach Robinson, Squarecrow, Spydeye Games, Pixelated Pope, Paradox, Nykotic, Manta Ray, GameMaker, GameArt Indie, Edward Holt, DJ Gibbles, Brenton, BokehDev, and Argo the Knot for supporting these videos. If you want to join the ranks of these very cool people, head on down to the Patreon page in the video description to join the fun.